I'm a great believer in the fluidity of everything, that everything just runs in and out of each other. And when you say, for example, my father influenced me, or my mother influenced me, but I am also a being, and I am responding to this influence, and I am conjuring up inside of me something about this influence, and I am of a different generation, and I have different influences. And so, in a simpler way, I like to call it a conversation, a dialogue. It's a dialogue of everybody dialoguing with everybody else. And that's where we come into transparency, When I was taking a course with Helen, it was the last course that Helen taught me at AUB, we asked her to construct our own painting from scratch, from building the frame to getting the cotton or linen or whatever it was, to gessoing it, to killu, and then to paint whatever we wanted. It was my first real painting that I came up with, without Helen telling me paint this or paint that. It was the same size as the upper and the lower registers of the fear triptych here. It was the same size. And I painted women that were sort of veiled, some of them from the back, some of them from the front, barely eyes, and all in blues and purples and pinks, where the background was very transparent, were done with the transparency of Helen. Everything was transparent. But the women themselves were veiled. And we were at that time, it was in the 60s, it was 69 or 68, and Twiggy and Beatles and Rolling Stones and Columbia University in Paris, Sorbonne, why would I paint these people? Later in life, I found out by talking with a art therapist friend of mine, colleague and a friend, and she said, maybe the veils were because you did not want to look inside yourself then. Maybe you did not want the transparency inside. You were just showing the things that were outside you that you could see, but inside you were all closed. And I thought that was very, very true. And mostly what I was feeling inside, and I really admitted, although we were in the hip generation and the peace and all that, I was terrified. I was terrified of everything. So when later in life, when I painted the fear triptych, I took the same size as the painting I did at AUB for the upper register and the lower register, and the middle register is the two of them together. And it has such a it is very, very structured, and the subject is when I had unraveled the fear, and the fear was open, and the fear was there, and the transparency, the Helen's transparency, the outside and the inside became one. And the transparency was no longer on the canvas sort of by color, but it was the inside. And that's where I decided that really the only way to continue in life and to move ahead and to communicate is to remove all the covers and to just be very, very who you really are and what you really are. In my earlier work, when I was in Washington or even when I was in Beirut, was very, very, very dark. Very dark, very agitated, very constricted, very troubled. And I relate that to the experiences of the Civil War. But the fear painting is the painting that sort of I wanted to dedicate totally to that experience, and I wanted it to be majestic. I wanted to be, just to express everything, where every single mark contains in it the whole painting. And I painted it in a trance, in a real trance, not conscious. I can't even explain it. It wasn't even conscious. I was just simply painting the emotion as it was coming out. Again, I was just reliving it, but as a much older person at the time. And many of my portraits before that were very, very, very dark portraits that described this terror, this turbulence, but never with this power, never with this power. The only way I can really describe it is being both Michelangelo's David and someone who totally submits, being fully in control and fully knowing what I'm doing, and then someone who knows nothing, being at the same time, being these two people at the same time, not knowing nothing and just following. And I was just, I don't know if I could call it any emotion. I know I write as well as I paint, and I use words to understand my paintings, but with a painting like fear, I think there are no words. When somebody looks at it, I think there are no words for it. There is no fear without grace. There is no terror without grace. There is no darkness without light. The light is intrinsic in the darkness, and you could see it inside the darkness. You can see the light. That's why you need to submit. You need to surrender, so that you allow your hand to take over, and not your mind or your consciousness. After I finished this painting and a couple of other paintings, especially of this kind, I'm drained. It could have taken a week, it could have taken a couple of days, it could have taken, I really don't know, but I know that once I finished, I called Rami, who was one of my AUB students, and I told him, you have to come and see. And he came and saw it, and then we discussed it and so on. But I remember that's the first thing I did, was to call Rami and tell him, you have to come and see.
Tell me more about the portraits.
I wanted to break, because I painted a lot with the dry brush technique, with oil, and very, very layered, and very flat, and very translucent, and So I wanted to understand exactly what happens when these things go inside, the fluidity and the inner workings of the paint. So I used this graphite to break, with the mark, to break this and to try to make the same connections, but in a different way. So I started using marks, and as I was painting with marks, the faces came out by themselves, so they were there. And when I paint faces, or when I paint paintings like this, I feel that they are not static in time. That is, that they talk about things that are past, things that are present, things that are future, things that are interconnected. And when the faces emerged, they also talked about the past of those people whom I painted that I don't know, their history, their restraint, their anger, their and so again, when I paint series, I paint many, many, many paintings of the same theme, so each one of them is valid alone, but it's also contains everything. So we are all sort of one and many people at the same time, so that's the thinking behind these paintings.
Nature is also in your themes.
Nature is very, very important for me, and more so since I have been in the US and have spent a lot of time with nature and the silence of nature. Where I went, it was very, very, very silent, and hardly any birds even, just the wind playing the leaves and the lights playing on the trees, and the mystery, the transparency, the silence. I understood a lot by being with nature, and it is actually what I'm working on now. In my studio, it's only the line and the oneness of the body with nature, the mountain, the sea, the body are all one. Everything is one, everything is transcendent, everything is silent, everything is open, everything is basically kind and loving. So that's how I've reached this age to have arrived with all these different narratives, to have arrived at this distillation of all of these.
I remember seeing at Saleh one of your exhibitions, I think the retrospective, maybe
the driftwood, yes. The driftwood was a very beautiful part of my life, where my friend and I picked them from the lake in Maryland, actually, and we took them back to our house in Washington, and I dried them out in the garden, and then I put them in my bedroom, and I made them listen to music, and I lived with them, and I saw animals in them, and I saw people, and I saw all sorts of things in this driftwood. I saw the unity of us in nature and the unity of nature. So I tried to paint them, bringing out resemblances between natural things. I had to close the house in Washington when I came back in 2010 or whatever. And so I shipped them with a shipment. And then I always wondered what the customs officers thought, but I never knew.
Afaf, also yesterday you told me about the sad story of when your mom passed away, then your sister, I think?
No, my father passed away, and then my sister passed away, and then my mom passed away.
And you will tell me about this book and how you didn't have time to contemplate the death of your dad.
My father died in 2000, my sister died in 2001, and then my mom died in 2008. But in all of this, it was very, very turbulent and emotionally just devastating. But I never had time to mourn my father at all. My sister was very ill, so after my mother died in 2009, I decided I'm going to take time, and I'm just going to just take a whole, as long as it takes, to communicate with my father and just to talk to my father. And so I would put music. I wanted to do something with clay. So I bought some clay, and I started, without knowing, without really seeing, just listening to the music and forming, just forms, shapes, small little sculptures, and thinking of him and thinking of our lives and thinking of my sisters and thinking of my family, all my family, and the childhood, and my father, and how he sat in his chair and how he was always reading and writing his books, and how he walks, and what he said, and all the time I was just playing with those. And I can't remember, I had a table full of these sculptures. And then Noel Nasser came one day to photograph some of my paintings, and he looked at those pieces. He was a photographer, and he photographed a couple of them. He put a spotlight on some of them and photographed a couple of them. And 2 days later sent me the photograph, and I just looked at it and said, "That's a book." You know, simple. It was like just like that. And so I called him up and I said, "Noel, would you make the book for me?" And he said, "I would love it." And so he came, and we had a session, a photography session. We darkened the whole apartment, and he photographed all the sculptures in different lights and under different backgrounds and surfaces, paper surfaces. Some of the surfaces I had painted on, I had drawn on, and things like that. And then we started making a story. بس أنا لأنه كمان أول مرة حسيت إنه بالفن مزبوط كنت بمخيم الYWCA بتور شوير، وكانوا عم يعطونا كلاي، وعملت بالكلاي راس عنزي or something. كمان كان عمري شي 7-8 سنين. The experience was unbelievable for me. I still remember it until now. I still remember it. الشمس هيك عم تضرب والصنوبر والهواء تبع طور الشوير، وانا قاعده عم بشتغل بهالكلاي. Coming back to my father, it was going back to that kind of experience that was started when I was a child. I wanted to recreate it again, and my childhood had a lot of shimmering light. I must have had a very, very happy childhood.
If you look back into this book, what do you feel?
But I don't open it. I can't open it. It's very hard for me to look at it one by one by one. بس هلا I'm in my 70s, mid to late 70s, and you become even more vulnerable than what you were before, and even more questioning than you were before, and even more pained. And especially now with the situation that we are all going through, بالعالم كله, and what my father stood for, and his integrity, and his honesty, and his beauty, it's all there. It's like my new paintings. It's just from another world. It's just from another world. And not that I'm not proud of it. Because I am so proud of it, it's so hard for me to look at it. Because we are so used to looking at horror and because I'm so proud of it, I cannot look at it. Not these days.
Afaf, you are also a writer, and I may say a poet. There are a couple of books next to you. Could you give us an idea about your books?
Okay. This is the first book I wrote. It's called Love Song. It took 20 years to write and to paint. I wrote it as a result of a very, very intense relationship. And I was writing poetry all the time. And I was painting these little watercolor ink drawings. And by that time, I had gotten to be 50 or something years old. And so I asked my mother, should I publish it? And she said, if you have reached the age of 50 and haven't loved like this, you don't deserve to live, so publish it. And so the book was born. It was my very first book, yeah. And then my second book was my father Reflections, which we talked about. And then there was Drawn by Light. Of course, as everything should end, the relationship ended, and I was very stunned, to say the least. But I didn't want to lie down in bed and disintegrate. So I figured that the best thing to do is to write something and to pick up 20 pieces of my paintings and to write about them, describing what I was thinking as I was painting. So they became, complementary pieces of art, but at the same time, both inside the artist's and outside the artist's mind. So this is one of my favorite books also. So this is it. Then the Beyond Art is a book of poems I wrote when I was in Washington during the COVID time, and I was locked in a basement apartment, and I had to amuse myself. So I couldn't paint oil, and so I painted watercolors and wrote poetry. And so when I came back to Beirut, I printed them. But the most interesting thing about this one is I'm going to read why it was written. Poems written and painted in friendship and with love as marks of a never-ending process of reflection and positioning in a world constantly rearranging its givens. Yeah. And then this book is Beirut Octet, which was the exhibition in Saleh Barakat Gallery in 2023. And it's a biography, and also a biography of myself, and also of a whole generation, starting from childhood, through early adulthood, through the war, through seeing light, learning how to trust, having a relationship, and then sort of being quiet, and then transcending and becoming my favorite expressions, becoming alive and extinct at the very, very same moment. That's how I feel our generation has reached or can reach the level of transcendence. Is you're so alive, you're almost extinct. And I wrote 2 books, The View from Within and Return Journeys, which are kind of a compilation of my work. Return Journeys is until 2018, and The View from Within goes a little further.
إيجات ما حكيتي لي عنها.
إيجات بتعرفي ما كنت أعرفها كثير منيح، يعني بعرفها من شغلها. مرة during the war I was painting watercolors وإيجات كانت بباريس وإجت زيارة على بيروت بفترة بيس هيك ببيروت، وقالت لي دورثي تعرفي على إيجات مزبوط وجيبي رسماتك خليها تشوفهم هيجات. وأنا استحيت بس جبتهم ورحت وهي جت فرجتنا رسمتها اللي كانت عم تعملهم بباريس. وأنا هجت يعني فكرها هيك قوية وهيك صوتها غميق وبتمشي وبتضحك وهيك، وهالرسمة delicate وsoft وألوان gentle. قلت مش معقول. This lady is a really very tender. All of this is just bravado. And I never forgot that. I never forgot those drawings. So that is my biggest memory of Huguette, really, that really marked me, is the contrast between what she presented and what her drawings were like, the ones that I saw. When I think of Huguette and Helen, and Dorothy even, I think of them as balancing freedom and responsibility, and how free can they be and how responsible can they be, and how to make their choices within the framework of the richness of their freedom and the richness of their responsibility. I doubt if they thought much of society as much as this is who they are, and this is what they want to do, and this is what they are going to do. Full stop. They called the shots. That's all. كلهم. ثلاثتهم. They called the shots. They had to pay the price for doing that, and some of the price was very high, and some of the price was a lot of glory, and some of the price was very beautiful, some of the price was hek, but they made definite choices. They changed the rules because this is who they are.
What would you tell women in general in the world and women artists in specific?
Just do what you want to do what you need to do what you have to do. Know what you have to do and do it, and don't let anything stop you. Don't let anything stop you. Especially women artists, don't let anything stop you.